Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our special meeting of council for the review of the draft financial statements. For whatever reason, I don't appear on the screen, and I'm trying to remedy that.
Bottom left-hand corner, you'll see a mic and you'll see
yes. Thank you. There, everybody's disappointed now they get to see me. Okay, good. I would take a mover and a seconder to open our meeting. Moved by Councillor Lagasse, seconded by Councillor Corbett, that this special meeting of council be opened at 6:31 p.m. All in favor? Carried. Now our clerks and other associated support staff are participating tonight using our new hybrid meeting camera system and audio system that we have. I trust that all of our broadcasting YouTube systems and other things are in place for our millions of viewers at home. So
everything's going.
Very good. I see we're missing a person or two, though. Have we received word on their attendance? I thought Auditor DeCare was joining us. Nonetheless,
we're just waiting on the arrival.
Sorry, Mayor McLaren, but CAO is talking, but he's on mute.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm off mute now.
In the meantime, we need to do a disclosure of pecuniary interest. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof. Don't expect there would be any. Okay, thank you. So our agenda item is obviously 3.1 presentation of the 2021 financial statements, and we'll allow Auditor DeCare a few moments to virtually arrive.
Through your worship, we're just trying to reach our auditor now and get him into the meeting. We'll let you know when we're ready to go.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Dean's coming in now.
Can you make it so it does say who's speaking?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
You have Dean there now?
I'm here, everyone.
Good evening.
I love when you get a warning saying this meeting is being recorded. Did you want to exit? I wonder if anyone ever exits.
Stage fright bailout at the last second.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, welcome to our meeting on your annual visit to discuss our financial statements for the year 2021. We've opened the meeting. We've disclosed that we have no individual pecuniary interests. So in that regard, I would hand off to you to lead us through the presentation on the financial statements.
Thank you, Your Worship. Brian, if you wouldn't mind, Jennifer Stickle's trying to get in too, if you could let her in. I think it's a good experience for the audit manager to be part of this. Thank you, Your Worship and members of council.
Okay,
You haven't seen
Jen's
her?
arriving. She's arriving now.
She's arriving now. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, everyone, for inviting us tonight. Just going to wait and pause for a minute. Is she in? There she is.
Hi, sorry,
Hi.
I was having some technical difficulties.
That's all right. Okay, this is being recorded, so that means you have to be quiet. Thank you, Your Worship and members of council. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk you through. Jennifer's going to bring up the financial statements on the screen, and I'm going to walk you through the draft financial statements for the Corporation of the Township of Bonfield, and then our audit findings report. And then I'm going to answer all the questions that you have with regards to the external audit, and make some further reflections to you in that regard, and hopefully we'll do that with enough detailed information to allow you as a council to approve these financial statements as presented to you tonight, so we can move towards getting them finalized. So we'll start with the financial statements. For those members that are new on council, which I don't think there are any, because I think our election's not till this fall, how it works is under section 296(10), I think, of the Municipal Act, you are required to appoint a licensed public accountant on an annual basis. BDO has been very fortunate enough to have been able to be providing external audit services to the Township of Bonfield over the last number of years. My report that I'm signing here to all the members of council, all inhabitants and ratepayers of the Corporation of the Township of Bonfield, is a clean audit report. So that means that you have brought Brian and the staff, the finance staff, have provided to us, to BDO, to Corey Greco, Jennifer Stickle, Ken Garth, Dean DeCare, etc., the whole team provided to us your general ledger set of accounts. After that, we perform audit tests, and I'll talk about some of those tests as I walk you through the financial statements. And Brian may jump in as well and make some comments on the financial statements. These are your financial statements that we assist you to prepare, and my report is right here on these next two pages. So the first two paragraphs talk about the fact that it's a clean audit, which is good. There were some material errors in the general ledger accounts which have been fixed. So those items have been recorded as adjustments, and I'll show you that in my presentation in a minute. If you scroll down, Jennifer, It'll talk about the responsibilities of management and governance. So just remember, there are three significant groups of people that are responsible for a year-end audit. One, you have management. They do all the day-to-day bookkeeping, record keeping. They enter into transactions, events occur that impact the municipality, etc. And they put together the general ledger accounts, or what are called the set of municipal accounts. The external audit firm comes in and we have access to everything: the bank statements, legal invoices, contracts, supplier bills, property tax bills, you name it. And we develop an audit program to go through all those municipal accounts. Then we report to management, and BDO report to you, those charged with governance. And you oversee the financial reporting process once a year. You have access to the external, to the municipal auditor at any time throughout the year. That's the way the law is written in Ontario, to do your bidding as a council. And that can be from time to time giving advice, looking at particular financial transactions, or looking at processes in terms of how Bondfield does things during the course of the year. The mandate of this particular assignment is to get a clean audit report on your financials. We also will make comments, if you look at these slides here that Jennifer's showing you, we also will make comment from time to time on your internal control environment, that being all the policies you have in place to make sure you keep an accurate set of general ledger accounts. We also will make reference to your use of the going concern basis of accounting, meaning that you believe that you are a municipality in the province of Ontario that continues to be able to pay your bills and be liquid financially. And again, I'm going to give you some comments on that as I walk you through, and evaluate the overall presentation and structure to your financial statements based on, number of years of experience. And I'm going on 32 years now auditing municipalities, many municipalities across the province of Ontario. So I've seen pretty much everything. We're able to provide timely advice and obviously an attestation or an opinion on your financial statements. And we're going to date it April 26th. So I'm ready to date this report today. Now, if we go on to the next page, your statement of financial position. So this is a snapshot at a point in time. So if you look at the municipality on December 31st, what did it have for assets, liabilities, and municipal reserves? So you can see you had $2 million in cash and cash equivalents at the end of the year. Again, that a healthy balance when you think that your spend is somewhere roughly around $400,000 a month. Okay, so if you think about it, at any given point in time, you budget somewhere close to $4.8, $4.9 million a year to run the municipality. And you can see you have $2 million in the bank. And again, all of that was subject to external audit testing. You'll also see over $500,000 in investments, in safe investments. There is nothing under the Municipal Act to prohibit you from being a little more aggressive as to the nature of financial instruments that you use. However, I will always caution council to make sure you invest in things that are safe, and capital preservation is your first priority. So typically what you'll use, and Brian can speak to this as well, but you'll use term deposits or what are called guaranteed investment certificates, which are the capital preservation is paramount. It's the number one goal. And then obviously earning a somewhat of a decent rate of return, better than a rate of return you'll get on your bank account, which will allow you to spend on municipal expenses. Taxes receivable. This council's heard me talk about this for a number of years, and you have done an extraordinary job. And I'm glad this is being recorded, over the years, bringing that balance down. So that means that you have been able to go out, not just in current taxation, so the 2021 tax year, you have been able to go out and make sure that you have reduced current taxes, arrears, carrying charges, etc. To an acceptable level. What we typically like, your tax base is somewhere in the neighborhood of $250,000 a month, or somewhere near $3 million a year. That's what you levy out to your taxpayers. So if you divide that by 12, you get somewhere around $240,000 a month, and you can see that you've got it down to $240,000. So about 1 month's worth of taxes. It gets risky when you exceed 2 or 3 months worth of taxes in receivables. That gets risky. And obviously you are a smoke and cash generating municipality if you have that down at less than a month worth of taxes at the end of December. In terms of liability, those are all your financial assets, 2.8 million. In terms of liabilities, who do you owe money to? Well, it's in three categories. You have trade payables, which is typically at any given point in time, you owe out suppliers of services or goods around $300,000. That's because people bill on account for the most part. Nobody provides a service, or very few people provide a service and ask for cash right away, especially when you're a municipality. So, the audit is performed. We give a bill, you pay that bill within 30 days or 60 days or whatever the case may be. And other services. At the end of December 2021, it was double the year before, but what you did have in there was you had some what I call TCA, what you guys call capital expenditures. You were investing in, I think it was Progress Road, if I'm not mistaken, and that would have been in the latter part of 2021. So you had some capital bills in accounts payable that again were subject to satisfactory audit testing. The second type of liability you have is long-term debt. Everyone talks about this. I'm a municipality. I have $1.8 million in long-term debt. How do I compare to other municipalities in Ontario, as an example? So in Ontario, we have this concept called, and your worship knows this, called an ARL, or what's called an annual repayment limit. And the Municipal Act in Ontario sets that limit for all municipalities, and it is based on your annual principal and interest payments. So you've got $1.8 million in long-term debt. You have $7.7 million in book value of your tangible capital assets. That's your roads, sewers, buildings, equipment, vehicles, etc., that are owned by the municipality. And you have payments of roughly $175,000, $180,000 a year, principal and interest payments. And I'll speak a little bit further to what your ARL is, but again, Brian, as your CAO, can talk better to it than I can. I can just reflect on it with you guys as a council to let you know where you're at. I mean, your debt level could be significantly higher than 1.8 million based on the law in Ontario. The third area where municipalities owe what other type of liabilities you have is landfill. So you say, well, what does that mean, Dean? Well, what that means is that you own and operate a landfill, and that landfill is utilized on an annual basis. And you set up a liability, you accrue a liability on your books for the expected cost of closing that landfill and caring for it over a reasonable period of time, which is in the province of Ontario is somewhere between 30 and 50 years. So that liability based on the life of your landfill, which I'll talk about in note 10, is $201,000. The last time that we trued up that number, everyone, was roughly 2018, the latter part of 2017 or into 2018. So it's something that, again, we will work with Brian and make sure that we do go out, get an up-to-date study on the capacity of the cells, etc. Where are we at in terms of the lifespan of the landfill, and relook at the costs of closing. And how we do that, how we project out so far is we look at the cost today. What would the cost today of being to close cells of a landfill? And then we discount that back using present value techniques to get the $200,000. That leaves you as a municipality in a net debt position of $439,000. That's very positive, everyone. So that's the number you read about in the news all the time, with whether you read about the province of Ontario and it's, what's it at, say $500 billion in net debt, or the government of Canada that's over $1 trillion now. That's the line item. So as a municipality, you're at 439. Why I say it's positive, it's not a significant dollar amount, A, compared to the size of your budget. And B, it's improved over the prior year by $100,000. So that means if you had to pay off everything, you'd be able to pay off everything with the exception of $400,000 with just simply what's in your bank account and what's owed to you. Then you go on to your other assets. Well, to run a municipality, we need tangible capital assets. We need roads. Okay, we need to provide roads for our citizens to get to work, to get, from house to home, etc., to get out of the city, into the city, the municipality, and we need bridges. We need linear assets, which is all the stuff under the ground. We need, trucks, vehicles, a town hall, etc. That's all in the 7.7 million. I did not see a significant investment in the past couple of years in your TCA, so it's something that I know Brian is got on the top of his radar or to-do list as the CAO of this great township. But it is an area where taking a look at the age of your assets and when they need to be either, restored or would they need to be replaced, or in some cases refitted. And then you have some small items in prepaid expenses and inventories, and again, not a huge change year over year. So that's a snapshot of where you were at the end of December, all of course subject to audit testing to our satisfaction. If you go to the next page, you'll see how well you did. So the next page is what's called in the public sector a performance statement. So this is your statement of operations. So earlier you heard me say that you spend about $400,000 a month. Where do I get that from? Well, I get it from here.
If I may,
sorry, go ahead, Your Worship.
if I may interrupt just for one moment, in my hard copy, the net financial debt is showing as 659,000 versus your quoted and shown 439,000. So was there a correction made since printing of the documents, I wonder?
Yes, Your Worship. So the copy that you have now, and Brian has it as well, he can distribute it, does correct for some gas tax that was actually utilized in 2021. And that gas tax was, I think it was around 180,000, Jennifer.
Okay, no, I was just wondering what the difference was there.
Jennifer's on mute, but that change was made this afternoon.
I think I took it off. Yeah, we're 196,000. I think we were.
And that was gas tax money expended.
And that was gas tax. So what happened with that, everyone? That's a very good point, Your Worship. That reduced your net debt and it increased your revenue. So if you look on the page that we're on right now, you'll see that government grants went up to 1.1 million. Now, there's two reasons for that, and this was actually Brian that caught this. Last year we talked about the fact that at Bonfield you had accumulated almost 4 years worth of gas tax funds, and you were doing that as a council for a reason, okay? Because obviously you were getting ready for specific initiatives, typically in the area of transportation, infrastructure expenses that you were going to make, and Progress Road is one of them. Development Road is one of them. And an example, I apologize if I said Progress Road. Development Road is an example of a capital expenditure that was planned to be that you had planned to utilize some gas tax funds. So you actually had to spend that money. There is a 5-year window. Brian can correct me if I'm wrong, where you need to actually spend those AMO funds that you get from the senior levels of government on qualifying expenditures, which typically is transportation. So yes, that change was made, Your Worship, this afternoon. So if you scroll down, the only big changes, if you look at your property taxation, you budgeted 3.1 million, you actually landed at close to $3 million, because don't forget there's adjustments, there's assessment adjustments, etc. But there was a growth from the year before, but not a significant one. So again, when you report to your taxpayers, the voters of the Township of Bonfield, then again, you can rely on the fact that it was I don't know if it was 3% or 2.some% increase year over year. Just one second. So it was a little less than 6% in total net year over year in your property taxation revenues. And that also factors in reassessments or tax adjustments. The government grants, which you always apply for, typically you get these, I mean, you get your OMF every year for as long as that will last. I mean, many of us think that within the next 5 years that'll be gone, but which is your municipal partnership fund, which helps you operate, but you're less and less reliant on that. Mostly you're getting money from senior levels of government, being the province or the feds, for capital, and that's for infrastructure. And I suspect you will continue to see investment in municipalities over the next couple of years. What I think you need to push for, and Randy, you can speak to this as the mayor, is you certainly want to make sure that municipalities are the ones investing in infrastructure. When you hear announcements from the Trudeau government or the Ford government, et cetera, on spending, because leaving infrastructure spends in our communities to those governments sometimes is not as effective. And I can be recorded saying that. User fees were up a bit year over year, and that again, we saw a little bit of the pandemic impact in there. for a total of $4.3 million in municipal revenues. What does that mean? Well, that affects a couple different things, everyone. Those are the revenues that you can spend, and you actually spent $4.3 million last year, or close there too, on expenses, and you ended up with a small surplus of $15,000, which is perfect. You are a municipality. You're not supposed to build, surplus funds. You're not supposed to lose a whole bunch of money either. But built into the expenses is $350,000 or so in amortization, $350,000 exactly in amortization. So that's a non-cash expense. So that's forced savings for you. That goes right into your bank account, and it allows you to pay down long-term debt. I think around $150,000 a year you pay down in your debt, and allows you to use the two different ways of buying capital assets, everyone, or three different ways are: you get money from the province or the feds, okay? You borrow money, or you pay as you go. Those are the three models for municipalities. So it allows you to generate enough cash flow to spend at least $200,000 a year in replacing equipment and road improvements, etc. There was not a significant change in your expenses year over year. The main difference, if you're a counselor and you're looking, saying, well, Dean, how come the budget was 3.9 and the actual was 4.298? Well, that doesn't mean that there was an overspend. It doesn't mean that you spent more than budget. What it means is that your budget did not include depreciation. So, and depreciation, as you'll see on the next slide, was $350,000. So if you add that to your budget, then you were actually within, I don't know, $20,000 of what council had approved for your 2021 budget this past year, which is again is a good sound financial indicator. If you go to the next page, you'll see the continuity, Jennifer. You'll see the continuity on the statement of changes in net debt. So this is to me, if I'm a counselor, I'm reading this, and this is the most important slide. This is the one that says, okay, did we get ourselves more into debt, or did we improve our net debt situation year over year from 2020 to 2021? And the answer is that you improved your your net debt situation by $94,000 year over year. And that simply means your revenues exceeded your expenses, and your actual pay-as-you-go capital assets that you bought, which for the most part was, like I said, development road, and there was some equipment that was bought for about $40,000. That, if you factor that in, you ended up, you had a positive number. So you ended up in a surplus of $94,000. So that factors in your revenues, your expenses, and your acquisitions of capital assets. And that's a good thing. If you look at your next page, is a page that I rarely ever talk about. And some of you, I'm sure, are going to roll your eyes and say, yes, you do sometimes, Dean. But I like this because it shows what happened to your cash during the year. So your cash grew by $400,000. And, we just said that, well, you broke even. Well, that's true. You did break even from your revenues minus your expenses, but $350,000 of your expenses are non-cash, just depreciation of old assets. So that alone will bump your cash up to $400,000, and everything else, just kind of washed. I like the fact that you spent $239,000 in the community, whether that's road work that we talked about in terms of development road, or whether that's equipment, all of which is disclosed in the note to your financial statements, or whether that's paying down debt. And the last 2 years, you've paid $300,000 in debt down. Okay, and I already told you that you have a significant amount of room to actually take on more debt. That being said, I like what your approach has been pay as you go, as you need equipment and infrastructure. And I'm going to apply for OSIF money. I'm going to use my gas tax money. I'm going to accumulate it for a few years, then use it for a large project. And I'm going to I'm going to use federal and provincial monies first. And then after that, I will do pay as you go. And after that, if I need to, I will go and lever, meaning I will go and get municipal borrowings. But again, a healthy amount in the bank account at the end of the year of $2 million. If you go to the next page, we get into the notes to the financial statements. So the next couple of pages are your accounting policies. I'm not going to go through them page by page, everyone. None of this wording has changed from 2020. So what the three things you need to know as a council is, do we follow the same accounting principles as every other municipality? Yes, you do. Are any of them aggressive? No, they're not. And thirdly, did any of them change from 2020? And the answer is no, they did not. We're not seeing, if any of them did change, then there would be a note to that effect that you did change your policy for how you accounted for taxation revenue, or how you accounted for government grants, or how you accounted for your tangible capital assets. We'd have to disclose that and what the impact would be, what the impact was on your financials, and that was not the case. $2 million, you can see in note 1, as a mayor and council, you might say, well, geez, you might say to Brian, you might say, could we set a little bit more money aside in term deposits? Especially now, it becomes a little more attractive now than it was a year ago, right? In terms of what you can get. It's still not, we're still not able to go get 5% on a term deposit, but we certainly are able to get more than the 0.6% that we were getting 2 years ago. Part of the reason, again, that you are carrying a decent size bank and investment balance, everyone, is because you've managed your property taxes really, really well the past couple of years. Okay, so you can see that of your current taxes what is it, did we say? $2.9 million. So only 146,000 was still due and outstanding at the end of December, which is fabulous. Also keep in mind, everyone, with regards to taxes, that all we talk about in your financials is just the municipal portion. We don't talk about the education portion, which is just simply a flow through. And that money has come in and has been paid to the 4 participating school boards that share in the education taxes that you collect from the citizens of Bonfield. On the next page is just normal trade receivables. You don't typically have a lot. That means that you're not billing people for, you have a little bit of stuff for user fees, but not a significant amount. Don't forget, your user fees are very limited. You only have about, what, $10,000 a month in user fees? And you can see your receivables around 16,000. Your biggest receivable is due from the federal government in recouping your HST, or your harmonized sales tax. So for every dollar of HST that you spend as a municipality, everyone, you're getting back somewhere around 78%, or somewhere between 78 and 79% of that by way of rebate. So you get all the 5% back, and you get, what is it, 80% or 78%, I can't remember, of the 8%, the provincial portion of which is called of the harmonized sales tax that you pay on expenses. And you file those rebate forms, should be filing 2 times a year, and you get those rebates back. And it was 42,000 at the end of December. Then we get into your tangible capital assets. So I made reference to your fact as your municipal auditor that you had spent more money this year than I've seen you spend in the past couple of years. And in particular, it was around Development Road, which was in the last quarter of 2021, October, November, December of 2021. You'll see the 196,000. That's what Jennifer said that her and Brian reviewed, and we may as well utilize some gas tax monies for that, because A, it qualifies, and B, we have some older gas tax money on the books. Let's use it. And again, I think that was very well, very appropriately used. If you look at the next page, you'll see the additions in your tangible capital assets the year before in 2020. And you can see that there was very little acquired. So we didn't spend any gas tax money in 2020 because we didn't buy any assets. The only thing we bought was a $15,000 piece of equipment. No comments necessarily on inventories. I mean, it is something from, again, once a year with BDO, we like you to do a count of your inventory, any small inventory items that you have on hand. But typically that's road salt and any small parts for culverts and things like that. You continue to have a $1 million line of credit. You haven't used it, and I'm not sure how long. Certainly not the past couple of years. But it is in place. I don't think you pay any significant fees to have it in place, but because of your hefty or your healthy, pardon me, bank balance, you haven't had to dip into the $1 million. But it is useful because A, you can utilize that $1 million line of credit at times if you're waiting for property taxes to come in, if you're doing a big bill because you're doing a road improvement or a road redo, and you're waiting for either debt to come in or you're waiting for a grant to come in. So again, that's the reason you have that line of credit in place as a municipality, and it's appropriate in terms of its size. Trade payables, the only reason it was up was the outstanding bill for development road work that was done in the last quarter of 2021 that you paid for in January 2022, and then accrued payroll liabilities. So, and again, what that means is that your final pay of the year, say it landed January 4th of 2022, well, most of that related to December, so that gets accrued in these books. Here's your long-term debt. And again, as a council, what you do is you scroll down here and make sure everyone is going down. So make sure yes, we made our principal payments on the $107,000 loan, made our principal payments on the big $1 million loan, the $17,000 loan got paid off, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So again, all these loans were applied for and got years ago for various acquisitions of equipment for the most part. You're only allowed to borrow money for the acquisition of tangible capital assets, and you're making recurring payments. So earlier you heard me talk about this concept of an annual repayment limit, or ARL. So what they do is they say, okay, how much property taxation do you bill out? So for you guys, let's say it's $3 million a year. And of that $3 million a year, you multiply that by 25%. So that gets you what? Let's just say, for argument's sake, $750,000. That's your maximum principal and interest payment. Right now, you're paying what? $135,000. That's in principal plus. Scroll down, Jen. I think there's another $15,000 or so in, $63,000 in interest. See it there, everyone? So the 135 plus the 63, that's the $200,000 that you're spending on principal and interest payments, where your annual repayment limit, and Brian gets a report from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing every year, and it actually will tell you your ARL for 2022 is blah, and you can actually get that right off the internet. And it likely is somewhere in the neighborhood of $600,000. It's important for you guys because, again, Bonfield, one of the things that you have on your radar is, of course, the redevelopment of Castleholme. So if there is and again, I can't remember where we're at with regards to this, but if and when there is a borrowing by that jointly owned home for the aged, and you guarantee a portion of that, that will go against your ARL. So your particular component of the principal and interest payments to Infrastructure Ontario will go against your ARL. Landfill I talked about, so let's please go get another engineering study in 2022. If you don't mind. And what that'll do is that will confirm some of the assumptions that are in there about how many years left are we saying? 116 years. We talk about capacity in cubic meters, blah, blah, blah. Well, those aren't really accounting. We do the accounting, you do the accounting, pardon me, and we check it. But the actual cubic meters, utilization, how full are the cells, that type of thing is all comes from professional engineering reports. Then the next page is your deferred revenue. So this is the one, your worship, that you would have had a higher amount here. So the 196 came off of here. So there is $745,000 left in deferred revenue. That's good. Use that money. So again, in 2022, 2023, for capital projects, typically, because this is gas tax or OSIF money, everyone, when you have to do some capital projects, you make sure you utilize this money over the next couple of years, because that was what the intended use was. That's why it's still sitting as a liability on your books. You don't want to have to give it back. And I've, to this day, touch wood, there's not been one municipality in the province of Ontario that had to give back gas money to AMO. And I don't want Bonfield to be the first. All your qualifying employees, everyone at the township, belong to what's called OMERS. OMERS is I think the third largest pension plan in Canada, if I'm not mistaken. It continues to be in an actuarial deficit, which is interesting given the performance of the markets, the equity markets in 2021. But anyway, your share of that, what you guys contribute, is called the employer share, and you contribute about almost $50,000 to that plan on behalf of your employees. You can see note 13, the only commitment we can find, and we do a search for unrecorded commitments, we do a search for unrecorded payables, that type of thing. So that's our job under the Municipal Act and under the Canadian Assurance Standards to do searches like that. But Brian and his team are putting in the financial statements, the only significant commitment that they're aware of is the contract for the OPP. So, you know, fundamentally, if you break down the municipality's 5 key goals in terms of keeping people safe and keeping the environment healthy and making sure that we have social programs and roads are built and they're safe and that type of thing, you know, paying the OPP for policing is a multi-year contract, and you can see it disclosed in note 13. Note 14 is your accumulated surplus. We did not see, interestingly enough, any change in the reserve funds. So I'll challenge you, Mayor and Council, to make sure you take a look and work with your new CAO. Look at your reserve funds that you have in place and make changes where necessary. You've got, what is it, 1.6 million, Jennifer, I think, in reserve funds. And the whole idea to reserve funds, everyone, is those are monies that have been set aside. They're sitting in the bank account. Okay, so you've got them literally in bank and investments for a particular initiative in Bondfield. And that doesn't have to be capital. Okay, it can be for some type of large expense that you're expecting to incur. Years ago, I remember when I first started getting into auditing, and Jason's going to make fun of me, but this was like 30 years ago. Every municipality would save for what? They would save for the election. So at that time, elections were every 3 years, I think, 2 years or every 3 years. So what municipalities would do is they build a little reserve fund because the election cost 100 grand, let's just say. So they'd build a reserve fund, and then they would utilize the reserve fund in the 3rd year or 4th year, whenever the election was, as an example. For you guys, you continue to have these, but take a look at the categories. Like, now's the time to take a look at that. Now, you might say, well, Dean, we're heading into an election year, blah, 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 and that's fine. But again, it's just acknowledging where you're at as a municipality. A tax rate stabilization reserve, that's just a general reserve. That's all that is. It's a fancy way of saying we can use this in case we can't balance our books with only a 2% property tax increase. Well, then we use the 154,000.
I'm going to interject here just for a moment in that we're going to transition from this special meeting, which is for the financial statements, because we're up against a timeline of opening our regular council meeting, which is following it by 7:15. So what I'm going to do is just hold you for a moment, Auditor Deferred. We're going to close this meeting. We're going to reconvene immediately and open the regular council meeting. And by my supreme powers as chair of the meeting, I'm going to move you to the top of the agenda to continue this conversation, if that's all right.
Yes, sir.
All right, just give us one moment then. I know we have a motion, pre-prepared motion for this meeting. I will also move it into the early stages of the regular council meeting. So the members of council, I would take a mover and a seconder to adjourn this meeting. Moved by Councillor Viancourt and seconded by, and I can only see Councillor Viancourt, bear with me one moment here, Councillor Foisey, that the special meeting of council be adjourned at 7:13 p.m. All in favor? Carried. Okay, so now we're going to immediately open our regular council meeting. I would take a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Foisey, seconded by Councillor Corbett, that this meeting be opened at 7:14 p.m. All in favor? Carried. Okay, now I will revisit the issue of disclosure of pecuniary interest when we are dealt with the financial statements, but I would now hand the conversation back to Auditor Deferred to continue, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So if we go to the next page, Jennifer, the financial statements, the way that they end, it's these are the last couple notes, everyone. One is a breakdown of your taxation, because you don't just charge ratepayers, but you also have something called payments in lieu of taxation. So that means that you're charging property taxes to another government. That's all that means, that resides in the township of Bonfield borders. There's a reconciliation on your budget, because again, under the law, under your own bylaws, pardon me, you have a balanced budget to zero every year, whereas in the financial statements, I think we show that you had a budget that balanced to a surplus of 194,000. Well, that's because in your financial statements, we ignore things like budgeting for long-term debt and transfers to and from reserve funds. Okay, that's a municipal concept, not an accounting concept. And then finally, there's a breakdown of expenses. So you're required under public sector accounting standards, not just to describe in your financial statements, where you spent the money, like we spent it in protection or transportation or general government or environment, but also how you spent it. So you spent, of your $4.298 million, that was your operating expenses. This is not your capital, just your operating. In 2021, 1.384 million of that was in payroll. 1.1 was in materials and contracts, or contract services, pardon me, is 1.3 million. So materials is goods, 1.3 million in services, interest expense and amortization expense. So this is highly aggregated, everyone, into these key areas. But basically, you're either paying staff, or you're paying contractors, or you're paying for goods, okay, that you consume during the course of the year. Then you're also paying carrying cost, 63,000, which is very, very minor because you don't have a ton of debt, long-term debt, municipal debt. And then amortization, we've already talked about. That's how you depreciate your older tangible capital assets. The library costs you about what, $80,000 a year to have that in Bonfield. And then, of course, we have the pandemic. And there's notes to the pandemic. What all municipalities did, when it comes to that, is they certainly recognized what can we do as a township or as a municipality to help our inhabitants and ratepayers, taxpayers, businesses, and families, individuals in our borders, in our municipal borders. What can we do to help them when it comes to things such as provincial lockdowns, business closures, when it comes to changes to employment. Now, what we seem to be dealing with, at the other end of COVID, we seem to be dealing with inflation or increase in costs. So again, just being always mindful. As a township, you still had the ability of levying, but there was some uncertainty back in 2020, and all of you remember as members of council, because you were all on council back in when the pandemic was first announced back in February or early March of 2020. The municipalities had concerns as well, because are people going to be able to pay their property tax bills? So, due to things like, closures and stay-at-home orders and things of that nature. So again, I think Bonfield, you navigated, and your staff should get some credit for this. You navigated extremely well as a municipality through the last 2 years and a couple of months. So I'm going to stop here. I don't have anything to say on the last note, Jen. But if you could bring up the other presentation, I'm only going to take a couple more minutes of your time, Council, because I'm sure you have other things on your agenda, and you may have some questions for me as well about something else that Brian had asked me. But what I will say before I just highlight a couple of things in here is a clean audit opinion. We did make some audit adjustments, which are included in this report to Mayor and Council that Jennifer's got on the screen right here. We will have some recommendations. So a recommendation letter will go to Brian over the next couple of weeks. I just need to get through April 30th, for those of you that know what that means. And aside from that, there were no significant concerns that came to our attention. What I'd like to do is answer any specific questions on the audited financials. Did I go through them in enough detail that Council is comfortable, Your Worship, approving these financial statements as presented?
Okay, I would open the floor then for anybody that has a question for any of the parties associated with the audit. Keeping in mind, I can only see some of us at the moment with the screen sharing, so don't be shy to speak up if there's a question out there. Okay, I don't see
Okay.
any hands. Oh, yes, Councillor Corbett. Throughout the evening so far, Auditor DeCare has been referencing the fact that all of our council members are very much tenured. Councillor Corbett is new to our team within the past 6 months, is it? Or
That's
a
right.
little bit more than that.
Yep.
So, but I'm certain that he's seen a financial statement or two in his time. So this is not new to him, but nonetheless, he has a question now. So fire away.
Thanks, Your Worship. I have seen some financial statements, and in fact, I've seen Auditor Care do it several times in several different organizations. So always a pleasure, Dean. So my question isn't actually specific to the audit, so I can defer it to later. It is to do with the ARL and the seniors housing. So I don't know if we're tabling those questions now or if we're going to be doing that post-audit questions.
Well, I don't know if Auditor DeCare is sticking around or not, so I'm fine.
I'm going
with
to,
any-
I'm just going to finish this presentation and then I'm going to stick around to answer questions specific to what Councillor Corbett's asking.
Okay, so it sounds preferable to defer it for the moment then.
Yeah, just for 1 minute, Councillor Corbett. So Jen, if you want to just scroll down, this is the audit findings report that talk about the audit program on your financial statements, on the municipal books of account. And again, it talks about the timeline and that type of thing. What we could look at doing, and we can work with your CAO, is actually, having a planning meeting in November where we can talk as members of council and the auditor about any, significant concerns you have while we plan the audit. And that's why we have timing and who we bring onto the file and things of that nature, when we test, what we test, that type of stuff. So you can keep going through, Jen. And we talk about the status of the audit. The only thing that's outstanding is we need a rep letter signed by Brian. We talked about the things that I already talked about, which was your trade payables at the end of the year were high, and so therefore we tested more. And then obviously there were some reasons for that we talked about with the development road costs that were accrued at the end of the year or that were set up as trade payables. We spent a lot of time on revenue, deferred revenue. We did have, again, conversations around the gas tax. The landfill, again, it's just around the calculations of the landfill based on its age and useful life and things of that nature, and the fact that we're going to look at getting an engineering study again next year. And again, management override and segregation of duties. As a smaller township, again, you don't have an accounting department of 12 people where Sally prepares the bank reconciliation and Johnny reviews the bank reconciliation, things of that nature. So that impacts the external audit. That means that we have to do more of a substantive based audit, looking at actual source documents. And again, everything came through to our satisfaction. We will write a letter to Brian over the next couple of weeks, talk about any internal control issues. Again, it's very similar. If there was something significant, members of council, I would bring that to your attention tonight. And most of it's housekeeping in nature, and all of it's bookkeeping in nature, really, Jennifer, with regards to how we account for municipal cash-based accounting versus public sector accounting, and that type of thing. So we had no unadjusted differences. Your management team, and again, our first year working with Brian went very, very well to our satisfaction. We did have to make some adjustments, and Jennifer can give you an idea and scroll through. These were some of the accounts that were adjusted as a result of the audit. So this is just to show council that we actually do something, because I know some of you think we just read the newspaper and then we just attend this council meeting. There actually is a lot of work that goes into the external audit every year. And then finally, there's a whole bunch of materials, and there's a copy of our report and materials on the audit process, etc. And I'm not going to walk you through that stuff. But again, Brian has a copy of this that he can give to all members of council. And again, if you're having any issues at nighttime sleeping, you're welcome to pull out a copy of your audit final report and read it. Now I'm going to go back, if you don't mind, Your Worship, to Councillor Corbett's question. So if you want to be specific, Jason, as to your question around the ARL and the new proposed NPO for the seniors complex.
Sure. Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. So, Dean, I'm hoping to get some clarity, because I think we have some conflicting information as to whether the principal and interest payments that would be associated with the seniors housing would actually apply against our ARL. I think if I read the material correctly, I think in 2021, a report from BDO actually at that point stated that it wouldn't. And now I understand that it will, according to what I'm hearing tonight. I'm hoping just to get some clarity.
Well, okay, I don't recall any report saying that it would not. It would not form part of your financial statement, the debt taken on by the NPO, but it for sure would. When you fill out your FIR and you have to disclose all loan guarantees, it will and should affect your ARL. Absolutely.
So the full annual principal and interest payment that would be paid by the not-for-profit.
Right. So if the NPO negotiates a deal and to take on $1 million in debt, I'm just using round numbers, and that requires a principal and interest payment of $30,000 a year for the next 30 years, as an example, then that $30,000 principal interest payment would grind down your ARL, and that would get confirmed to you, that would get confirmed by the province. Okay. So it would get disclosed if it was just a guarantee. This is where the confusion is, I think. Maybe if it was just a guarantee, like based on the documents that I've seen, you're guaranteeing the debt of an NPO that will build a seniors apartment building in Bonfield, which is much needed. If that's the case, then there'll be a note to your financials saying that the corporation, the township of Bonfield, has guaranteed the debt of a separate legal entity, a non-for-profit that resides in the borders of our municipality in the amount of blah. The conditions or events that would have to occur that would trigger us to have to take on those principal interest payments with the financial institution would be A, B, and C. During that time, while that note's in your financial statements, you have to disclose that in your annual FIR to the province, and it should grind down your ARL. Now, that's a little different than Castle Home, which is another example where there is a guarantee, but that's a little different because that guarantee is in conjunction, members of council, with an actual levy payment. So in that particular case, not only do you have a guarantee, but you also will have to record a liability on your books. And that liability will be shown, a financial liability on your books for whatever, let's just say $300,000. I'm just throwing out a number. And the principal and interest payments on that $300,000 will grind down your ARL as well. Okay, but like I said, and Brian can speak to this better than I can. I mean, I can just give you my advice, but your ARL is calculated annually. You already know what your 2022 ARL is, and again, like it's more than $600,000 a year in principal and interest payments. That's the room you have. So the Castle Home project and the seniors project, both together, might be what? I'm just guessing right now, might be $150,000 a year in principal and interest payments. But again, Councillor Corbett and everyone, I don't have the exact dollar amounts in front of me, but it is something that, again, I would get a report from your CAO, get a report from management, from staff to bring to you to show you what are our total guarantee obligations for Castle Home and for the new seniors complex. And, how would that impact our ARL? And then to Councillor Corbett's point, how much room do we still have left? Because we still have other stuff we need to do. Does that answer your question?
Brilliantly, thank you.
What did I do?
Now, I don't know. I think Brian said, Your Worship, that there might be some other questions for me in this regard. So, Brian, was there other councillors had questions around that or not? I can only comment on what I know right now. I don't have a ton of information. I know that we're still waiting for the proponent to reach out, I believe, for some advice around the procurement and financing of that particular development or project. I have not heard from anyone. So my comments tonight are just simply as the municipal auditor to members of the mayor and council as to how this would impact your financial statements.
Okay, just for my own benefit, and because I've inadvertently touched a button and I can't see anybody but myself now, so that's really helpful in a virtual meeting. But Nonetheless, you've got 7-point comments in a correspondence to us dated April 12th. And further to Councillor Corbett's questioning regarding the debt repayment limit, there's also notes on your advice that our financial statements would be necessary to be completed by the 30th of April every year. I just recall that for various circumstances, many times we fail to meet that deadline. And that's something that council and future support staff should be noting. And secondly to that, also your final point 7, the basically the escape clause or the end positioning language in there is seemingly missing in your review of it. So without prejudging what council chooses to do tonight, I certainly have, based upon what you stated there a few moments ago, which seems to be contrary to impressions we were left with earlier, that this might be best deferred for clarity until our next council meeting. But we're not at that point of even dealing with that in our agenda at the moment. We're trying to wrap up financial statements. So just noting that for the points while you're here, that's all.
Yeah, and to be clear, Your Worship, those comments were based on, if all the, just so all the council understands, those comments were based on my review of the financial institution's agreement with the proponent. Okay. And in that agreement, there would be a side agreement called a guarantee agreement that would be signed by the corporation, the Township of Bonfield. So you would get your solicitors to look at that agreement, etc. And it would have implications on your financial statements and your annual repayment limit. It would not if the loan guarantee was not in place.
Okay, and I appreciate that clarity, because that is what has changed since so many of these conversations that we've held on this issue. Is the actual lending agreement is now formalized, and that is where I think your new advice is coming to us in relation to that. So I appreciate your clarity on that. In that regard, and moving us back to dealing with the financial statement matters, there was a pre-prepared motion. I guess before I go there, is there any other comments from council, or comments or questions related to the audited financial statements at this point in time? If there isn't, oh yes, Councillor Vinecourt.
Just a quick question, Dean, on our reserves. So I see we haven't changed like 1.6 million. Do you think we should change our debt payment also? Like, what do you suggest if we want to raise it, and by how much? Can we play with those numbers? And
it's interesting, because what happens is the faster you pay down debt, it always sounds like a good thing, right? And it is, especially in an uncertain interest rate market. So it is something, Councillor Vinecourt, that you could consider doing. But in order to be able to answer that, I need to be able to look at your full, what is the 10-year capital plan in Bonfield? Like what does it call for? So there's going to be a couple of spike years, right, where there's going to have to be a little more spent than normal. Like you should actually, according to the accounting numbers, you should be spending $200,000 or $300,000 a year in infrastructure. That and where I get that from is that's your depreciation base. So just as a nerdy accountant, that's typically what you should be spending. That there's going to be years where it's more than that. So I'm not sure what the total budget is on Development Road. You guys would know better than me. But there's going to be years where you're going to spend more than 300,000, and there'll be some years, possibly, I've seen the past couple where you spend less, and that can happen based on the age of your assets. So right now, your reserve funds, I wouldn't use them to put a lump sum payment down on long-term debt, Councillor Vinecourt. That would not be my recommendation based on the interest rates that you have on those debt facilities. But what I would say about your reserves is I would look at it and say, my rule of thumb when I used to talk to all municipalities throughout the province, my rule of thumb was somewhere between 3 and 6 months worth of expenses. So, you are roughly a what did we say earlier? $400,000 a month. So let's say we're 4.8 million. So that's 2.4 million in 6 months. So you want to be somewhere between 1.2 and 2.4 million in reserves, and you're at 1.6 right now. Okay, so you're in the middle of where I would expect a municipality, financially healthy municipality, to be in terms of reserve funds. Now, the challenge for council is, what are the priorities? What are council's priorities for those reserve funds? And that's when you have to go through that note, and you have to then work with your CAO and say, okay, these reserves were created many, many moons ago. Some of them they've been on the books for years and years and years. Let's revitalize this. Let's have the talk about reserve funds. And to Councillor Vinecourt's point, there might be something might come up where there is an opportunity to pay down without penalty, to pay down a debt, and you may want to use reserve funds to do that. And that entirely is at the option of council to make that decision. But right now, I'd like to think that it would be, you would have some of that $1.6 million would be for capital, because at some point I think that the money's going to dry up at the provincial and federal level. Although their priorities are very clear right now, they seem to have a lot of money, right? Based on announcements that they keep making. But at some point you have to assume as a municipality that the belt's going to get a bit tighter at the senior levels of government, meaning that the only way that you guys can continue to buy capital is pay as you go, meaning that your revenues have to exceed your expenses, and factoring in depreciation, borrowing money, or, I'm sorry, I forgot about this earlier, Councillor Vinecourt, or reserve funds. So if you need a new, maintenance truck or something like that, you have reserve funds for that. You don't have to go borrow. You don't have to go get a grant. You don't have to take it out of your property tax revenue that year. You have reserve funds to do stuff like that. It's nice to have that flexibility. So that would be my challenge on the 1.6 is let's really look at it, in terms of what should be a proper breakdown. For your operating, I'd like 3 months of it, 3 months of expenses. I'd like that to be, so at least 1.2 million for operating. That leaves you about 400,000 for capital. Those are just my off the cuff comments to you tonight.
Okay, thanks, Dean.
You're welcome, sir.
On that
Councillor Lagasse is very quiet. Like, she has a question for me every year.
We'll see if she does tonight.
Talk about
putting you on the spot, eh?
I'm good this evening, but my usual question is always, what would be a healthy increase for our yearly when we're doing our budget? What would be a healthy increase for us?
That's how you're sneaky, Councillor Lagasse. That's a very, very loaded question. And you know why I say that, everyone? Because what's the biggest uncertainty right now? Cost, inflation. So, if I'm a councillor and I'm an inhabitant in the great township of Bonfield, what is my expectation when I know that I'm going to the grocery store or the gas pumps or whatever the case may be? And Jane's exactly right. This is critical. Is now the time to actually hit taxpayers with a less than inflationary increase, or and because you're recognizing that they're being hit with inflation everywhere else, or is now the time to say to the ratepayer, you know what, we have to make that decision and be responsible to balance our books as a municipality, as a township, and we must keep up with inflation. So your costs will go up, and your costs will go up likely more than 4%. And so then the issue becomes, what is, to Councillor Lagasse's question, what is, when we're striking a budget for 2023, what's the proper rate? We're also, what else we're going to see, everyone, is we're going to see a bump or an adjustment in assessment values. We have to. Like the last ones done by Impact were what? Where's Randy? Like I think it was more than 2 years ago. So we're going to see the impact of Impact. And then it's an issue of, okay, so once we see that, because there's two variables to your property tax, right? There's the impact value on all the properties in Bondfield, and then there's the mill rate, or there's the rate that you guys are deciding to use. Do you increase that rate by 3%, 4%, or 5%? Again, it's a very difficult question. I know you think I'm talking in circles right now. It's going to be up to mayor and council, and we're in an election year, so you know it's difficult. Should this council be making that decision, or should it be the newly elected council make that decision? So the budgeting process has to start. To Councillor Legacy's point, I think you need to recognize inflation in that budget. You have to recognize the fact that we're in an inflationary, at least temporary, we're in an inflationary period, and that includes wages. So it's pressure on wages and pressure on cost of services and goods. And those costs are likely going to be somewhere at a minimum of 4% higher than they were the year before that we've seen in the past couple of years. And we're coming out of this pandemic. So we've seen a lot of savings. You guys did, private sector did, every municipality saw savings during COVID because people couldn't travel. There was a lot of things that were deferred, if you will. Well, now some of the costs are going to come out. And again, Brian, your new CAO is going to talk to you about that. He's going to say that we're going to be challenged for some operating costs, let alone what your capital plan is going to be the next 5 to 10 years in terms of infrastructure. So if there's one thing I can say to you, the comment I'll make to all municipalities is that you have to at least be looking at a 4% increase in property taxes just to keep up with inflation. It's a tough decision to make, and a mayor and council could decide to go less. But then, it's one of those things, if inflation continues to rise, you'd be hitting them with that much higher of an increase in 2024. So I'd like to see you keep pace with inflation, but please factor in the impact reassessments. So just figure out where you're at with that cycle. I think it's coming up this year. And figure out where you're at with that, because that alone will be, I'd have to think that alone will be in excess of 5% jump in values. So you may not have to increase your rate at all to still get a 4 or 5% cash flow increase. You understand what I'm saying? Now, but the people that vote for you, they're not going to see it like that. They're just going to see it. How much do I pay today versus how much do I pay tomorrow? Cash. They don't care about if it's the impact or the rate that you guys put on. They don't care about that. They just care about, if I paid $1,200 last year, why am I paying $1,300 this year? So that's the challenge you guys are going to have. And again, anyway, those will be my comments.
So Auditor Decaire, when you entered our meeting this evening with your associate, you, for good reason, said she had to be quiet, because obviously her attendance in this meeting has taken 70 minutes, where it normally takes us about 20 to hold this conversation on the annual statement. So thank you for holding her exclusive conversation to the minimum for us. But having said that,
or you're mad at her that I talk too much, Your Worship. One of those two.
I'm just perhaps acknowledging the fact that when you at the outset set the stage that perhaps she was too chatty, that may come as a learned behavior.
I'm not sure I understand if you're trying to say something, Your Worship, but
not at all.
Okay.
No, not at all. But anyway, we appreciate
the apple
your
doesn't
comment.
fall far from the tree.
No, okay. But having said that, we are now close to 43 minutes into a regular council meeting. So I'm going to ask that council, if they have any further questions related to the financial statements, that they direct them either directly to Auditor Decaire or our CAO or others. Nothing is set in stone, obviously, but for the benefit of tonight's meeting, we're going to move on from that. In that, there's a pre-prepared motion that council had in their package. I would take a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Legacy is moving and seconded by Councillor Corbett. Be it resolved that the Council of the Township of Bondfield hereby acknowledges receipt and approves the 2021 consolidated financial statements for the Township of Bondfield as prepared by the firm BDO Canada LLP, and that Council directs the CAO to provide public notice that a copy of the 2021 consolidated financial statements is available at the municipal office and on the township's website in accordance with Section 295 of the Municipal Act 2001. Any questions related to this motion? All in favor? Carried. So in that regard, our audited financial statements have been accepted by council, will be posted to the website, and are available for people to preview in hard copy if they choose to pick one up at the municipal office. And as always, I greatly appreciate your assistance with our audit, you and your team. And I thank you this evening for your comments related to it.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Sorry that I didn't
Thank
talk
you.
enough.
Yeah,
Next year,
I guess
we'll
I
book
should
you
have
a
cut him
little
off.
Yeah. Have a good meeting. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
So now, for the benefit of our regular council meeting and our viewers at home who wondered what you walked into when you tuned into YouTube, that was a carryover of our meeting related to the 2021 audited financial statements that we migrated into our beginning of our regular council meeting that we're now going to commence. We opened at 7:14 p.m. Related to that to adhere to our procedural bylaw, but we set the balance of the agenda aside at that point in time to continue the conversation of our earlier meeting. Having said that, our last meeting was March 22nd, and we have minutes in our package related to the March 22nd meeting. I would take a mover and a seconder to accept those minutes. Moved by Councillor Corbett, seconded by Councillor Viancore, that the minutes of the regular meeting held March 22nd, 2022 be adopted as circulated. All in favor? Carried. And because we're now in a new meeting, is there any disclosures of pecuniary interest related to the agenda of the regular council meeting? Seeing none. There's no presentations and delegations that I'm aware of. Minutes and reports of municipal committees and boards. Planning Advisory, and they had a meeting on April 5th.
We did have a meeting, and we have we had two applications. One that will come forward, and the second one is being asked to be deferred. And the one that's being deferred, I'd just like to make a quick note on it. Where's my for the application for application B3 over 2021-2022. There was some concerns from North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority, and this is regarding the subdivision joining two lots, which the lots were already small because this subdivision was back, I believe, from the 90s. So we did come to terms that we were going to work for the subdivision, and it went through. So these lots, according to the Conservation Authority, are small to begin with, and they will be housing 2 10-unit buildings for the senior housing. Their concerns are that it's less than 1 hectare in size, so it would need a hydrogeological study and to demonstrate that the smaller lot sizes are appropriate. And they have other issues regarding the services. There are no details on the design or size of the sewage system. So there's work to be done there. The details project are unknown at this time. So they don't know if there's going to be enough room for these services, or if they need to be bigger, because they would have to work with not only the Conservation Authority, but also Environment, the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. And also, another concern is, I also note that there is no provisions for an alternate location for the sewage system in the event of failure, and defines as to who is responsible for operation and maintenance of the system in the event of default by the owner for any reasons. So I thought I would bring that up for future. This is what they'll be working on, these details. A detailed site plan is required to ensure that all infrastructure, building and sewage system, wells, parking entrances can be accommodated on the property. So there's a couple of things that they have to work on, and that's why this application will be deferred till these are resolved. And that's it for planning.
Okay, thank you. Fire Department.
We haven't had a meeting for a while. I was speaking to CAO Brian Walker about setting up a meeting, and we're supposed to hopefully get one soon.
Okay. CAO Walker, I believe, did some walking and went over to the fire department last night. How was your visit there?
Thank you, Your Worship. Had an excellent visit with the volunteer fire department as they were about to commence their regular Monday night training. It was an opportunity for me to meet the fine men and women of our volunteer department and to thank them with much gratitude the service that they provide our community, and wish them to continue to do so. And we talked a little bit about the matters of the budget for 2022 for their department, and it was an excellent opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Recreation and Fitness, they did have a meeting, it looks like, on April 4th.
Yeah, we did have a meeting April 4th. Actually, we had it in person, which is finally after a couple of years. We had a guest, Richard Belair, is moving out of town, so we thanked him for his services and wished him luck in his new future position. We have a new member also. It's coming up in the motion, Jessica North Gerard. She put her name in and will be joining the committee. Also want to thank staff for the job well done for getting all the work they did with the grants for the waterfront development. They did an awesome job, and we spoke about that project, the splash pad, summer camp also is a topic. We also planned some activities for Canada Day and other activities for the year coming up. So we probably have a busy summer. So hopefully everything goes good.
Okay, thank you. Library.
Yes, our last meeting was April the 4th also. And the main subject that we talked about was COVID-19. At that time, a month ago, most people are still wearing their masks, and there's a slow reopening of the library, and they're still on the COVID hours. And they reported the staff shortages, which there's one less as of just lately. I think it's Miranda that has a new job. So.
Okay, thank you. General government has not had a meeting, nor has police services, although one is long overdue. There is a conference coming up, police services boards, and I'm trying to get a handle on exactly the constitution of this new detachment board that's being formulated in the ministry's regulations. But it would seem that the new boards are not taking effect until after the municipal elections. Emergency management was to have a meeting, I guess it was last week. That was deferred at my request, and it's scheduled for middle of next week. There's obviously the sixth wave of COVID-19 is real. Don't know whether it's affected myself or not. I keep testing negative, but as you can tell by my hacking away here, it certainly come back from the OGRA conference with something. And nonetheless, that drove the point home to me that we're not out of the woods yet. If you can do everything right for 2 years and drop your guard for a day or two, and you could end up with COVID. So not saying I have had it, but 4 tests tell me I'm negative. But whatever I had, I certainly don't want to see anybody else have to endure it, because it's if it's just a flu, it's a good one and nobody needs it. That's all I can say in that regard. But in our emergency management meeting of next week, we'll be having conversation related to obviously our protocols that we have in place, our meeting in person, move towards that. As you see on our screen this evening, we're working towards updating and have updated our capabilities to meet in person and yet still broadcast to our viewers at home, all of those things. So there'll be dialogue there. The province has also extended the congregate setting, masking requirements in long-term care, hospitals, etc. So even at the provincial level, they're starting to recognize the fact that we still need to be quite cautious with COVID-19. Public Works has not had a committee meeting. Manager Carr, do you have any commentary for us at the moment related to it?
I was lucky enough to attend the OGRA conference. AOR's had our general meeting. I attended 4 sessions on asset management planning, as asset management plans for municipalities are due on July 1st. It seemed not as busy as the usual conference, and actually the core of downtown Toronto didn't seem as busy with the pandemic. But the reclaiming of Brother Glen Park has been pretty much completed, so you're able to drive in there now. There's a roadway. We removed all the trees, trimmed all the brush back. We're just waiting to get some quotes for a gazebo roof repair, and it's a great little honey hole for fishing. Don't tell anybody. Today we did the electrics for the curtains for the rink. So all of it's wired up now, so we can continue with our process of having those installed. They should be installed within the next month. Provincial is going to be working on Development Road to finish up their relining of their culverts. I'm working with our engineer to have a tender ready for any dig outs and excavated culverts that need to be done before we proceed with Development Road. The tender for calcium is due on May the 5th. So for the next council meeting, we'll be able to discuss the tender for that. And busy times for Public Works. We're catching up. Our roads have finally thawed out. Hopefully they dry out now, some on the shoulders, and I think we're quite on top of things.
Okay, thank you. So then, going to motions of our committees, I have a motion from Planning Advisory related to consent application B22, 2021. I'd take a mover and a seconder for it. Moved by Councillor Foisey, seconded by Councillor Viancourt. Whereas the Planning Advisory Committee has recommended to Council that consent application B22, 2021 Holly Duquette be approved. Be it resolved that Council approves of this recommendation along with the conditions and notes set out on the attached Decision of Approval Authority form. Any questions on this? All in favor? Carried. As mentioned by the Chair of Planning, there's another motion related to a deferral. I'd take a mover and a seconder for it. Moved by Councillor Legacy, seconded by Councillor Foisey. Whereas the Planning Advisory Committee has recommended to Council that consent application B3 2022 21025 Ontario Incorporated, Descon Construction, be deferred so that the applicant can deal with some issues that have come up on this file. Be it hereby resolved that Council approves of this recommendation. Any questions? All in favor? Carried. Moving then to motions of recreation and fitness. We have one appointing a new member. I take a mover and a seconder for it. Moved by Councillor Vinecourt, seconded by Councillor Corbett. Whereas the Recreation and Fitness Committee recommends to Council that Jessica North Gerard be approved as a member of the committee. Be it hereby resolved that Council approves of this recommendation. Any questions? All in favor? Carried, and welcome to Jessica. Next motion is outside of the committee group. So we're moving to reports and non-municipal committees and boards, PHENOM. As you're aware, their in-person conference is happening in North Bay. I believe it's next week. And a number of us are registered. If my staff are able to hear me, please work towards registering me as well. I left it open there to see how my recovery was going to go along first before I wasted the registration fee. But looks like I can attend that. So please do so. Are all the other members of council attending? Councillor Foisey is, and okay. Anyway, they've got as you've seen probably in the correspondence, they've got a train for the northern people coming from Cochrane down to North Bay, reiterating the fact that passenger rail is slowly making its way back into the north. That'll be probably a demonstration run of some of that capability. Conservation Authority, they had their 50th anniversary. Maybe the member would like to speak to that.
Yes, we will be having a meeting tomorrow night, but part of our ad hoc committee, there's three of us, three board members who's volunteered to be on this ad hoc committee for the 50th anniversary. And last Friday we had the big kickoff, and where we had the unveiling of the new logo for the North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority, and we did a little presentation regarding some of the highlights, and they're on the North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority's website, and also you'll see on your agenda under correspondence that they would like us to proclaim the 50th anniversary for the month of May. And also you have information number 4 for the budget. You'll see our budget and a little bit of the review for the conservation. That's it.
Okay, thank you. So you say your meeting is tomorrow night then? All right. Castleholm, as Auditor DeCare mentioned, the construction is underway there now on the new revitalization of Castleholm. I was contacted by Mayor Degagne of Chisholm yesterday related to the fact that their AGM is tomorrow night for Castleholm. She, of course, is our member rep representing East Ferris, us, and Chisholm Township on that board. And her question to me was, because the current chair, Chris Main, has fulfilled, there's a time limitation on how long you can remain the chair of that organization. If I had any thoughts on who would make a good new chair of that entity. So we had a chat about that, and just a brief update on how our new participation in that board is going. So it was nice to hear from her. There's no notices of motion that I'm aware of, so we're moving then into bylaws. Introduction and consideration of bylaws, the first, second, and third reading. A bylaw to appoint a deputy returning officer for the 2022 municipal election. As maybe viewers at home are aware, the municipal election is this year, and not only that, CAO Walker took me a bit by surprise yesterday when he mentioned the fact that the nomination period opens very soon. I believe is it May 1st, CAO Walker?
That is correct, your worship. We have the nomination period is May 1st through to August 19th.
Okay. So the municipal election is obviously underway across the province, but seems like we've just ended so many federal elections. We're heading into a provincial election, and of course also is our municipal election coming. So there'll be plenty of election earring going on for people who enjoy elections. In that regard, we need to appoint our officers for that process. So I take a mover and a seconder to appoint a deputy returning officer. Moved by Councillor Vinecourt, seconded by Councillor Corbett. First, Council deems it necessary and expedient to pass 3 readings of the following bylaw at this session. Be it hereby resolved that a bylaw to appoint a deputy returning officer with the clerk's powers and duties in relation to the 2022 municipal election be read a first, second, and third time, passed and numbered 2022-19, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and be engrossed in the bylaw book. Any questions? All in favor? Carried. Next item, 8.2, first, second, and third reading, a bylaw to appoint a compliance audit committee for the 2002 municipal election. Just for, again, viewers at home, compliance audit committee is an entity. In our case, it's 6-member municipalities form a joint committee. And in the event that there is concerns related to conduct, for the most part financial, related to the municipal election, this compliance audit committee will review any complaints or concerns that are raised in a very formal way related to that, and have a statutory duty to conduct investigation in that regard. So I would take a mover and a seconder to further the audit committee. Moved by Councillor Corbett, seconded by Councillor Foisey. Whereas Council deems it expedient to pass 3 readings of the following bylaw at this session. Be it hereby resolved that a bylaw to appoint a compliance audit committee under the Municipal Elections Act for the Corporation of the Township of Bonfield be read a first, second, and third time, passed and numbered 2022-21, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and be engrossed in the bylaw book. Any questions? All in favor? Carried. 8.3, a first, second, and third reading, bylaw 2022-22, being a bylaw to execute a financing agreement with the nonprofit seniors housing. As was discussed earlier in our financial conversation with the municipal auditor, and some good questions that were raised along with his 7-point memo to us based on the financing agreement. I don't know, CAO Walker, do you have any commentary to make at this moment related to it? I see in our screen we're also being joined by the consultants for the housing group, Mr. Harriman and Mr. Butler, and also Mr. Demise, I guess. CAO Walker, I'll let you lead there first. Yes.
Through your worship, yes. Effectively, we are at the 1-yard line, if I can use that analogy, on the football field, and really just have very little distance to go to bring this whole process and many years of work, hard work, diligent work and due diligence by the staff, by our consulting team, by this council and previous councils. And we're at a juncture now where the last remaining item is the passing of this financing agreement. So we have an opportunity to have some dialogue here and speak to it. Earlier in the meeting, we had the opinions expressed by our auditor in terms of the effect on our ARL statement on an annual basis, and that. But that's all I have to say, Your Worship. Let's let everyone chime in and have their discussion.
Okay, thank you. For the benefit of those that have just joined us, there was some concerns raised, or not concerns, but basically some new advice shared from our auditor, in that it was his overview opinion that this does affect our annual borrowing repayment limit, as it would show in our financial statements. And second of all, he has some concerns with just advice in that our financial statements, to satisfy the current agreement from the case, would need to be completed by the 30th of April every year. And further to that, the loan guarantee doesn't appear to have any drop-off date. You know, it would be a continuing liability for the 40-year duration of the situation of the mortgage. So I'm just speaking without the guidance of counsel here. My own thoughts at the moment are, having heard earlier in the meeting that the property in question where the construction is proposed also has its own challenge at the moment to satisfy some things. I don't see the urgency this evening to sign bylaws and documents and financing agreements for the sake of 2 weeks while we get reaffirmed clarity from the auditor on this, because the advice council was given along the way, as provided by the previous CAO, was that it would not affect our debt repayment limit officially on the books. It would show as a note. It would be acknowledged, but it wouldn't affect our borrowing capacity and other such things. The advice has changed based upon his review of the actual financing agreement. So I think it would be beneficial in the meantime for us to drill down and really get some clarity on that, because it is a substantial change if that proves to be the case. So is there any member of council that has any questions or any guidance to provide related to what I've just said there? Yes, Councillor Corbett.
Thanks. I guess my questions would be through to either David or Keith. You guys have worked with other municipalities setting up this kind of structure before. Have you encountered the counter advice that we're receiving from our auditor and then our previous CAO, and where has it landed with other municipalities? Because, I mean, we'd be looking at a principal and interest payment of roughly $300 and some thousand dollars a year against our repayment limit. So I'm wondering what your thoughts on that are.
Maybe I'll take a stab at that, Keith. Thank you for having us, Your Worship and councillors. And by the way, I was able to view your entire presentation from Dean Deferred, and he did a great job, as he usually does. And I was glad to see that he made some pretty strong statements about the healthiness of your town, and kudos to the group, have done a great job. And I was also happy that he had mentioned that there needs to be more investment in infrastructure and housing within the community, and there's a lot of room for taking on more debt. But more to the point with the ARL, in most municipalities that we've dealt with over the past 20 years on these projects, the municipalities have mitigated their own risk and dealt with their own ARLs. And there's most of the projects that we've done are directly with the municipality rather than the municipality guaranteeing the loan of a nonprofit. So in some regard, this is more rare than the municipality themselves taking on the project. I know that the information was contradictory because Dean DeCare had sent a letter last year saying that it didn't affect the ARL, and perhaps he's went back and did some more research and now saying that it does affect the borrowing ability of the municipality, but it doesn't affect the financial statements. And possibly that may end up being true. And luckily in this case, you have lots of room to be able to accept that $248,000 extra hit on your ARL. I'm just concerned now that if more research is done on this project regarding that, and it turns out that it does affect the ARL, doesn't affect the financial of the town, does that mean the project's dead because it affects the ARL, which has no bearing or effect on the community or the town or the operation of the town? That would just be one of my questions. And the point about the April 30th, well, we spoke to the bank, and I think this is just something that you have to negotiate with the timing of the preparedness of the financial statements. I don't think anybody's going to call anybody in default because of that. I think it's something that has to be worked out between the bank and the community. Another, just as a general comment, also, nobody's going to invest any more dollars into buying adjacent properties or fixing the road in front of this particular property, hundreds of thousands of dollars, until we know or somebody knows that the town is going to be on side with putting the last bit of this deal together. So to your point, your worship, I think it's important we don't wait because it just drags us right to the lame duck period and possibly may not even get done. I know that many times these projects we've done have had successful outcomes, and quite frankly, it's really the only way path forward on these projects. And yes, there's risk, but I think we all have to mitigate the risk. And without a guarantee, this project doesn't go forward, and those 30 odd people that are waiting for their house won't have a house. So I'm not sure if delay is the way to go, because this is the last missing piece. If we don't have a consensus for that, then I think the project's dead, honestly.
Okay, I'll come back to those comments in a moment. Councillor Lagasse, you have a question?
Yes, I believe right when this project came to our table, we had a recorded vote, and I had voted against it, and I still have the same belief. I haven't changed my mind, unfortunately. Years ago, when it came to the town hall, a big presentation came, not from this company, but prior company, I think 2 or 3 companies before, where it was not going to, but the same board members, it was not going to affect the township. They were not going to affect by 1 cent of our tax money. And as years went on, they wanted an in-kind service of 60,000, then it went to 90,000, and then 250,000. So it wouldn't affect not 1 cent of our tax dollars. Started to affect it to the point where it's been on my table, for several years, and also for the staff. So we've already involved in-kind service by all kinds of ways. I'd like to remind, and also what Dean DeCare says, how it will affect us, to keep that in mind. But Castleholm is coming up, and Castleholm we will be levied for that also. And that's a seniors home program that I don't think we had choice in becoming a part of. And as Dean DeCare mentions, it's not just our municipality, but it's a group of municipalities. So we carry the project amount throughout all the municipalities. This one, however, will be affecting us in several ways, and to be guarantor of that. So if something happens to this company, something happens to this board, it comes on the Township of Bonnfield. It comes on to our plate. We're responsible. We will be responsible for the seniors project. And that's something that I don't think the Township of Bonnfield can afford to do. Those are my remarks.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, David, before I answer your earlier.
Just quickly,
comment.
Councillor Goss, I just wanted to make a couple of points. Number one, we're never asking, this group is never asking for any in-kind services whatsoever. And we don't want the town to spend $1, not even on legal work on this project. All of the costs associated should be transferred to this group or to our project and not cost the town one penny. I don't know where those costs come from, but maybe that was before the in-kind, but that's been ruled out now completely. The other thing is, yes, if they default on their loan, the nonprofit, the town will be asked to mitigate that and pay for that loan. But however, you know, you have rents, right? You got rents, and you also have a reserve account that they're building. So it actually would never get to the point where the town would have to pay anything, but it would just be something you may have to deal with in the event of a default. And by default, they would have to not take that money and put it into the bank and pay the loan. And you would know that by the monthly statements, and you know that by being on the board instantly if there was something wrong with it. So again, it's, do you want to leverage your goodwill and create housing in the community, or you don't? That's just the key here. That's all the question is.
Okay. Just in support of your rebuttal of Councillor Legacy's statements earlier, and I'm appreciative of the fact that you and Keith and John are the friendly face of this seniors housing entity and have been speaking to us now for a period of time. But there was a nastier group that used to speak to us, and they took a bullying approach to it when they had the upper hand in the council. And if you saw the recorded votes related to this project prior to your friendly conversation to us, they were usually split down the middle 3-2, and they were related to substantial in-kind contribution that they were looking for, that Councillor Legacy did correctly articulate, that had amounted to $250,000 at one point. And the reason for that is this group that you're working for, Mr. Butler and Mr. Harriman and Mr. Demise, they have absolutely no equity in anything. Nobody's put a dollar in anything to get anything off the ground. They're trying to, make a project out of magic dust. And as has been stated so many times, the only person with any equity and any money is the Township of Bonnfield, and that's who they kept coming to with their hat in hand. So don't discount the fact that there is a history here, and it's a long history. And the fact that you're stating tonight that there's 30 people potentially homeless if this council doesn't swing the right way based on this new information is probably inappropriate, in that I have no idea how many people are homeless, because it's a closely guarded secret who even wants to live in this thing, because I've asked so many times. And the latest response to my question of that is a lawyer up response saying, freedom of information, we're not allowed to tell you. I think that anybody that wants to live in this township-sponsored seniors housing development should be more than proud to say I want to stay in my community. I want to live in that thing. And by all means, if the mayor wants to know, tell him. And the secretary of that board has for 3 years now been telling us that she's in regular dialogue with those people who have made deposits for to live in that entity. And at no time in the past 3 years, in all of those supposed conversations that occurred, did it ever occur to them to say, the mayor's been asking for years now, he'd like to know who'd like to live in his community. Do you mind if we tell him? And they never bothered to do that. So to say that now the township of Bonfield is the holdup to the fact that seniors housing won't occur is quite a stretch, but keeping it on the friendly and on the business, which is what I think we need to do. This new development related to this financing agreement from the case was always a fairy dust proposal anyway, because it's highly leveraged based upon extremely low interest rates that the auditor pointed out, and that environment is rapidly changing. And now, based upon what seems to be contradictory information, our debt repayment limit imposed upon us by the province is roughly $600,000 a year, which is what he described to us earlier. We can firm up that number. I think it's a little bit higher. But in his comments to us this evening, in our normal course of business right now, with our debts that we have, we're using about 33% of that capacity. Earlier in the meeting, a member of council asked about, I think Auditor DeCare missed the point, we have self-imposed policy related to our debt repayment limit. We have a self-imposed voluntary policy that we only go, I believe it's to 40% of our debt repayment limit, and then red bells start to go off and we temper our behaviors. If and when we chose to ignore the alarm bells and we went to 100% of our debt payment limit, the province typically then concerns themselves with the fact that the municipality is right up against the wall. So the fact that the limit is whatever figure it is, 600,000 or 700,000, no municipality ever wants to go there because you impose upon yourself great scrutiny and oversight. Having said that, we're at 33% of our debt repayment limit now. I fully agree. And the conversation moved forward on the basis that it was expected by this council, or by myself at least, that this co-signing of this agreement, there would be, it was said by all parties, there will be, and you said it here tonight, there will be no seniors housing in the township of Bonfield if it isn't for the goodwill of the citizens of the township of Bonfield and their equity. So this board that purports to have everybody's interest, as I said earlier, they haven't got a dime in the game. It's the township of Bonfield in an arm's length process that's building a housing project. And now we're hearing that that's going to severely restrict our ability to borrow for the next 40 years. And the third caveat to that is this long-term care home in North Bay that we're provincially mandated to renew and enter into an Infrastructure Ontario mortgage with, will burn up probably another 15 to 20% of that debt capacity. So if this information is new, based upon the case agreement, and that's where the auditor tonight is prefacing his comments, this is new information to him based upon his review. If it in fact holds water, there is no appetite on my part to guarantee this mortgage at all, because it basically handcuffs this municipality for the next 40 years. So lame duck period or not, my suggestion tonight is that we wait 2 weeks, get firm clarity on this, do the hard math on it. But if you want an answer tonight, I can tell you the answer is no from me, because this would seem to be financially suicidal for the township of Bonfield. The other part of all this, and I'm trying to keep this conversation as friendly as it can be, just to reiterate the falsehoods that we've been told along the way. This housing organization told us they had bought the property. They had bought the property. We have property. We're going to build it on here. That organization and that board doesn't hold a deed to anything. It's a numbered company because it was earlier in my agenda tonight, and they've bought a piece of property that isn't even fit to build this facility on at this point in time. So for that housing board to run around and tell this council that they own property in this township, that's fraudulent, and I've had enough of it. So that's where it sits with me. Is there anybody else that wants to speak to this issue? Yes, Mr. Butler.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and to some degree, Your Worship, some of the points you bring up from the past are in fact true. You're right. None of those people have a dime invested.
Hold on a moment there. Anything I say at any time in a council meeting is going to be true. So you don't need to say that some of them are true. All of them are true. Now move on. Proceed.
Okay. So you're right about the fact that they have no money invested, other than all their time for the last 8 years trying to get a nonprofit organization going and some social housing. I don't think their intent is to make any money. Therefore, I don't think they would invest any money because there's no benefit for them directly. And I think that if I'm sure that the land, I think they were referring to the fact that they would be owning it or do own it indirectly. It's been purchased by a numbered company that's controlled by John Demise, who's on the call here tonight. And yes, the property has it's problematic because it's tied up with Jules Gagne's subdivision, and there was a lot of things he didn't do properly over the last so many years. And by purchasing a piece of his property, it landed everybody in the problem as well. So they're having to work that out. I think that you may be getting a positive result from Dean DeCare since he's re-looked into it, and it may affect your ARL. Yes, you may have to go up to 50% in order to make something like this happen. It's not for me to decide, and it's really the council what they want to do. But I know that we've tried to act in good faith. I'm not sure why the lists haven't been properly sent to you about the tenancy, because I've seen the list and I've seen 22 names with checks, and I don't know why this hasn't been brought even indirectly to you, or make you sign a piece of paper saying I won't divulge this to the newspaper, but at least you should be able to look at it. In every other community we look at it. So I'm not sure where that comes from either, but that's pretty much all I can say on this subject. But again, I don't think any more money is going to be invested by anybody else until we can get to that next level. And 2 weeks, it's probably going to come out that it affects your ARL. I trust your auditor. Maybe he's done the research now and changed his mind from last November. Thank you. That's all I have.
All right, thank you. Move to Councillor Corbett's question there in a second. The hang up of the who wants to live in the thing is not the end of the world to me. It's just a point of the strength of the relationship, for one. And second of all, when they lawyered up yesterday and said that it's a privacy concern, the lawyer in his response that I was copied on said it was a bit odd that anybody'd be asking who wants to live in there. Well, maybe if he's only told part of the story, and that the letter that went out to every citizen of the municipality 5 or 6 years ago was my letter under my name with the survey attached to it. And so when I want to know what the outcome is of my letter as the mayor of the corporation, I don't find it a bit odd at all. I find it a bit concerning that that information is withheld, but that clears the air on that. I'm moving on from it. Yes, Councillor Corbett, would you have a question, please?
I do. So I don't have the lengthy history on this project, but what I do have is the new information that came tonight, which was that this potentially will affect in a pretty significant way the debt repayment limit that we have to play with. I don't think it's unreasonable that we postpone for 2 weeks. I think with that new information, I have to gather additional information. Quite frankly, I haven't seen the strong asset management plan. I haven't seen what our future expenses are truly projecting for the next 10 to 15 years. And affording myself the opportunity to work with the CAO and staff to try and gain some of that information isn't unreasonable from my perspective. So I would support postponing to this meeting just so I can gather the information required for a more informed decision.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments related to this issue at all? Yes, Mr. Hearn. And then Councillor Weidman.
Sorry, just as a follow-up with respect to the ownership of the land that was purchased by the number company, simply because obviously the housing group doesn't have the capacity to buy the land. So the lot was purchased in trust for the group, and it was built into the capital budget. So it is dedicated for the project when and if the project ever proceeds ahead.
Well, I wouldn't doubt that, but the fact that members of the board itself purport to own property related to it, that's quite a stretch when the contractor owns the property, in fact. But I'm not belaboring that tonight either. Yes, Councillor Weinkorn.
Just some concerns on the property also just coming up now that I think 2 weeks wouldn't be a bad thing to wait too, just to get more information on the property and comments from Dean DeCare for the, that's all I got. Thanks.
Okay, it would seem the majority of council. Yes, Mr. Demy.
Hi, thank you, Your Worship. Just wanted to add a few comments with regard to the concerns about the property, just for point of clarity. I can't speak to the history. I haven't been involved that long. I understand there are some, long-standing concerns. I understand the trust and the disclosure side of things as well, that there needs to be that sort of information comfort. So, I'll let that play itself out. But with respect to the property itself, the concerns that were expressed involve more Planning Act related items. So Ms. Lagasse read out the severance application deferral and vocalized that the reasons were due to comments made by the Conservation Authority. But in fact, that's not the primary reason. The property is capable of being built on now as we speak. Whether we did it as 1 or 2 phases, started off immediately today, the engineering proves that the building could be constructed at least 10 units right away immediately. Building permit applied for tomorrow. It satisfies all the conditions for that. Where there is a little bit of, let's say, where everybody's focusing on problems with the property per se, is in respect to severing the property so that it becomes 2 smaller properties so that there could be separation of services for the properties. And that just boils down to dealing with, the engineering and the sizing of the services like the septic tank and whatnot. By having the smaller properties and the smaller services and separating them for the 2 buildings that were planned for the site, it allows for more streamlined maintenance, local authority approval, and just a simpler process for getting both portions of the project, the 10 units and 10 units, approved by local authorities rather than having going through more provincial processes. So that is really the only issue. And when we talk about the adjacent property owner, that only comes into effect in the event that there is the severance. If in fact we said forget about the severance component, and we'll just go through the provincial process for the application for the servicing of the site. That all goes away. So that had to do with just some frontage on the road, and the adjacent landowner hadn't completed road frontage. So really, when it comes down to it, all the engineering and the items that were mentioned with regards to the Conservation Authority, the studies, there have been reports done by a hydrogeologist with respect to the serviceability for the septic and whatnot, and those have all come out in the reporting. So, and that's part of typical process as we go through any sort of development in getting with a building permit. So at this stage, we're nowhere near that. We can't even rely on that reporting. And if, let's say, for some reason in a month from now, the engineering studies didn't report it, which isn't what the information is providing right now today, then, with or without a guarantee or approval, the project just wouldn't proceed if that property wasn't suitable. But according to the current zoning and the regulations that are related to the property, should we be able to prove through the engineering studies that it is serviceable, then a permit can be applied for right away, and the Conservation Authority would have to rely on the engineer. So I think that hopefully just clarifies about the complications. They're not showstoppers by any means. They're just check boxes that need to be done in order to get a permit for building and demonstrate serviceability of the site. So hopefully that answers that question. I can't speak to the other items, unfortunately. So thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lagasse, I see you have a question.
Yes, I believe Mr. Demers said that there was going to be one 10-unit built when conservation. I urge you, if you have a copy of the Conservation Authority's report, to read it. It goes into quite a lot of detail, and the purpose of the application is to construct two 10-unit senior complexes on each of the properties. The following comments are based, and these properties are smaller than what is recommended. And we had worked with the proponent. We had worked with the subdivision because it was from the 1990s, and we worked with them and we made adjustments. We approved the adjustments because they were small, and we approved them. I don't think we had two 10-unit senior complexes in mind when we did that. I urge you to read the reports.
Okay, Mr. Demers has a response that I'm acknowledging, but just for the basis of our meeting tonight, I don't think arguing technical points of the Planning Act and the Arm's Length Conservation Authority is helpful to council. So, but having said that,
I agree 100%, and thank you, Ms. Lagasse. I appreciate that. I have read the reports. If I said there would only be 10 units on the building or on the site right now, I guess I misspoke. There is 20. It's planned for 20, and it is zoned for 20. The 10 would be 2 lots, each divided 10 and 10. So that was part of the severance application. So all the items that were a part of that report have been considered. They're in the hands of our engineer. They've all been reviewed, and we'll proceed and provide everything that's required if and when it gets to the next step. So I just wanted to satisfy at least that we are accommodating those steps, and that's not the primary reason tonight, as the mayor pointed out, that the project isn't moving forward. I think it's due to these other more significant financially related reasons, and I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thank you. It would seem there's general consensus amongst council to defer this to our next meeting. So without any strong protestations to that effect, I'll move on from the agenda, and it'll carry forward as a referred item. Having said that, for the parties here, obviously very concerned with how this has taken a bit of a turn, we will be drilling down over the next couple of weeks to get clarity on that, and we will communicate what the outcome is to you at the first opportunity that we hold it. So we're not, if we learn something, in your interest earlier than the next council meeting, we'll certainly share that with you. Okay, so moving then to disbursements. And thank you for your participation this evening, gentlemen. Disbursements, I would take a mover and a seconder for the disbursements, and then I would entertain any questions. Moved by Councillor Lagasse, seconded by Councillor Corbett. Any questions related to the disbursements in our agenda? Yes, Councillor Lagasse. Excuse me.
Can you unmute?
Is
Okay. I've got several, but on general government, page 1 of 3, so I believe it'd be further on down your package. Christy Russell, the RV enforcement legal fees of $1,093. What is that? What is that?
Has to, those are the legal fees that we have inquired with the bylaw enforcement officer, consulting with our legal department, and regarding enforcement of the RV bylaw.
I was wondering if we had amended, I don't recall amending our official plan with the new RV, and I thought that it was supposed to, it was to go to staff to go under review so that we can we could do some amendments to the bylaw for that. And I don't know why we're dealing with RV's enforcement legal fees, and why we're dealing with the RV enforcement if we haven't even dealt with this. Mayor McLaren, I don't understand. Were we not supposed to review the official plan regarding this?
I'm acknowledging Councillor Corbett's question in a moment, but to answer your question, there is a process underway under the official plan review that was discussing with CAO Walker yesterday. But notwithstanding that, with the rules are the rules at the moment, barring any change, come what may, in the process of the official plan review. But at the moment, any policy that's in effect right now in the Township of Bonfield is enforceable. So I'll let CAO Walker speak to these expenses, but that's what they relate to, is current enforcement related to the current rules of the day.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I can just add a little bit of information. My predecessor, former CAO, had directed the bylaw department to proceed with enforcement of the current official plan and zoning bylaw. I will let council know that we are on schedule with the current review of our official plan. We have had meaningful conversations with our partner, JL Richards, and as of yesterday had a meeting with every acronym of a ministry that you can possibly think of to join in and have that discussion, whether it's involvement with the environment or with Ministry of Northern Developments and Mines, OMAFRA. You can go down the list. They were all present, and we had a long 3-hour meeting yesterday in terms of the review of our current processes and what we are looking to move towards with our new official plan. The hope is that we will be able to do some community engagement in the very near future and speak to the citizens of Bonfield and gain their insight as to some of the matters that are pressing, things that are not currently within our official plan. I'll just give a couple examples. Short-term rentals, accommodations being one, tiny homes and small factor housing being another. Those are just a few, just a couple of many things that we need to address in the official plan. The expectation is that the official plan will probably fall to the next term of council for their review and adoption. And that's based on the current schedule that we have. And the hope is that in the very early part of 2023, we can have the official plan adopted and ready to go, and the zoning bylaw that comes out of the official plan. And we have a deadline of May 2023 to do so. So we are well within that timeline. As it relates to the expenses here, because the former CAO gave direction to the bylaw enforcement department, bylaw enforcement officer to proceed on these on this issue. The municipality did put out letters to those that were cited as being in contravention of that bylaw. And then there was some that came within compliance and others that did not. So then the second phase of that was to have our lawyer through Russell Christie provide letters to those that didn't fall into compliance, and now we're executing and following up on those.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Corbett, did you have something related to that, or is it a separate question?
My point was the same as yours, Your Worship. I'm good, thank you.
Was the same as mine?
Well, yeah, it was the same as yours.
Okay.
So I don't need to repeat it.
Okay, that's fine then. Councillor Agassi, did that answer your question related to what the bill is for?
Yes, it answered it.
Okay, and you said you had other questions related to disbursements?
No.
Oh, okay. Is there any other questions from members of council related to the disbursement? Okay, I got a motion moved by Councillor Lagasse, seconded by Councillor Corbett, that the following disbursements be approved as prepared. APO 6004 and 6015, consisting of all departments, for a subtotal of $533,659.76, and payroll batches 1205 to 1212, amounting to $79,057.75. This results in a total disbursement of $612,717.51. Last call for questions on any of the line items. All in favor? Carried. Correspondence, MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and their message to us. They're seeking support, and there's a pre-prepared motion to support a message in the yearbook at a cost of $299. I would take a mover and a seconder for that if there is. Moved by Councillor Foisey, seconded by Councillor Corbett, that the Corporation of the Township of Bonfield supports MAD Canada's vision to stop impaired driving and to support victims of this violent crime by placing a business card size ad in the MAD message yearbook at a cost of $299 plus applicable taxes. Any questions? All in favor? Carried. North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority 50th Anniversary Proclamation. I would take a mover and a seconder for it. Moved by Councillor Lagasse, seconded by Councillor Corbett. Whereas the Township of Bonfield recognizes the important social, environmental, and economic value of healthy watersheds to our residents, visitors, businesses, and ecotourists. And whereas the North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority is a community-based environmental organization which has been providing leadership in watershed management to the Township of Bonfield and our neighboring municipalities since 1972. And whereas the North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority plays a crucial role in supporting science-based decision-making in watershed planning, development, resource management, flood forecasting, drinking water source protection, water quality monitoring, conservation, land management, stewardship, and education. And whereas the Township of Bonfield recognizes, appreciates, and values the expertise, advice, and leadership of the North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority in balancing human needs with the needs of the natural environment on a watershed basis. Whereas the North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority recognizes that protecting and conserving our watershed relies on collaboration and cooperation with individuals, organizations, and communities, and is celebrating its 50th anniversary by recognizing others who are watershed heroes. And therefore, in honor of the 50th anniversary of the North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority and their contributions to the social, economic, and environmental well-being of the Township of Bonfield, Mayor McLaren and Council do hereby proclaim May as the North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority 50th Anniversary Celebration Month. All in favor? Carried. Yes, Councillor Lagasse, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, if you go on site, there's an application that you can fill out if you know of anyone for the watershed hero. If you have anyone that you'd like to apply for, and also the canoe race, our 45th canoe race, minus the 2 years of the pandemic, will be hosted in July. I think it's the third week of July. And I did do a little history of the watershed, and I read it at the media release, and it will be going, the presentation will be going out on that website. So stay tuned for that.
Okay, thank you. Moving to item 3, application to license a shore road allowance from Andre McWilliams, from North Star Drive. I'd take a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Lagasse, seconded by Councillor Corbett. Whereas Andrea McWilliams has submitted an application for license to use a portion of the shore road allowance abutting her property at 223 North Star Drive for addition of stairs to access the water and erect a small shed for storage. And whereas the Deputy Chief Building Official and the Director of Planning and Development have reviewed this application and recommend to Council to approve Andrea McWilliams' proposal to license a portion of the shore road allowance as per the attached application, with a condition that all permits be obtained from the North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority, Oceans and Fisheries, and the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, if required, prior to issuing the license. Be it hereby resolved that Council approves of this recommendation. Any questions? Yes, Councillor Lagasse.
I believe this is the same subdivision that we had problems with a few years back, where the line that was drawn on the shore road allowance was a little off, and there was a dispute between two landowners. I think you remember that one, because we had to demand that they take down that shed that they had their water pump in. So this one, what I see, although I don't see the whole plan, I wasn't given the whole plan, I do see where where the dock will be going out. And also, I like that doesn't matter which way the lines go, it looks like it's going to be safe from the neighbors. So I just wanted to stress that there is no boundary there. If I'm correct, then I'm agreeing with this application.
Okay, I didn't review the sketch associated with it, so I didn't recall the contentious shed that was placed quite some time ago that came before council and caused a lot of dialogue. Any other questions or concerns related to this application? All in favor? Carried. Item 4, City of North Bay, participation in the Household Hazardous Waste Program. Annually, we need to declare our willingness to participate in that. Is there a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Foisey, seconded by Councillor Viancourt. That the Council of the Township of Bonfield recommends continuing participating in the Household Hazardous Waste Program with the City of North Bay for the year 2022 at the cost of $2,160. Any questions? All in favor? Carried. Item 5, Bonfield and District Lions Club, Blue Sea ATV fundraiser. It's back after a COVID hiatus. I take a mover and a seconder for that request. Moved by Councillor Foisey, seconded by Councillor Viancourt. Whereas the Bonfield and District Lions Club is requesting the use of the Township Public Works garage site for overflow parking and any available picnic tables for their 18th annual ATV fundraiser and poker run, May 14th, 2022. Be it hereby resolved that Council approves of these requests and refers them to the Public Works Department. Any questions? All in favor? Carried. Item 6, Code of Conduct complaint, Councillor Foisey versus Mayor McLaren. And then the motion reads Mayor McLaren versus Councillor Foisey. So you can take it whatever way you like in your paperwork. I take a mover and a seconder to accept that report. Moved by Councillor Corbett, seconded by Councillor Lagasse. That the report titled Code of Conduct Complaint, Mayor Randall McLaren versus Councillor Eric Foisey, the Township of Bonfield, 2021 final report, April 14th, 2022, submitted by the Integrity Commissioner David King, be accepted as submitted. Any questions? All in favor? Carried. Information. Waterfront project update. The package that's in our information package that's in our agenda, while it's appreciated, I noted one thing. Maybe other people want to ask questions or comment on it, but just before I forget, I flagged in a section of it. I should always dog mark my pages. It mentions stairs getting down to a section of the equipment, and I thought, please, no stairs. It's all about accessibility and inclusion and everything else. There it is. It says playground in Centennial. That's what it is. Parks and Recreation, location of the playground. A retaining wall will be placed with stairs leading to the area. Collaboration with the Lions to move the flower box and sandbox will be needed. If and when and at all possible, and I don't immediately recall the lay of the land there, but if we can mitigate the stairs with a ramp in any way, shape, or form, let's catch this now before we're too far down the track to make changes, because there's nothing worse than difficulty navigating stairs, and while we're under construction, let's make it more accessible if we can.
They'll be both, actually, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yes. You're welcome.
Is there any other questions or comments on related to this? I know it's only information at this point, but now's the time to chat about it if anybody wants to. Okay, in your disbursements, you saw that there's substantial purchase of equipment related to that coming forward. So motion to support moratorium on new gravel mining approvals in Ontario. I don't think there's too many new quarries opening up in our municipality. They're all either licensed or it's quite a cumbersome process to open a quarry. So I don't see that as great concern to us. Item 3, Halton Hills emotional support, same subject, new gravel extraction. Many of these GTA perimeter municipalities have quite a dialogue whenever a new gravel extraction happens, because it just changes the environment of the neighborhood completely with the truck traffic that flows through there. Item 4, as was alluded earlier by our rep, Conservation Authority's budget has been submitted to us. Item 5, the town of Gravenhurst seeking a motion support for Russian sanctions. I don't know why any municipality wouldn't be supportive of that, in that for the most part we're relying on our federal government to lead the charge on that. So enough said on that. Zora Township, joint and several liability, like any conference that I've ever attended to, the subject of joint and several liability came up at the OGRA conference, as is the response from whatever government of the day is in place. We're working on it, is what the answer always is. And I don't know if anybody saw in the media, the City of North Bay's municipal insurance is up a substantial amount of money, almost $200,000 over the year prior. And joint and several liability is one of the biggest scoring problems that they have related to why their rates went up, notwithstanding the fact that insurance in general is up across the board for all municipalities. Item 7, connecting all Canadians to broadband funding announcement. That is a piece of information that came through initially in the email chain, and it's furthering of the Blue Sky Network's efforts and others to obviously bring awareness to the fact that while some of us enjoy pretty good connectivity to broadband, there's still dark holes and difficult places all over our municipality and other municipalities in our neighborhood. So anything that can be done to further that process, if the past 2 years have proven anything, it's that the internet and its connectivity and its speed is essential for growth and participation in the new world order related to the internet. There's no new business that I'm aware of. Unfinished business, Kelsey Shank, request to purchase leased property. It seems there's been some conversation happen somewhere in our administration in that site inspection is sought regarding that leased land. CEO Walker, do you have any words to add related to the motion that's in our package?
Thank you, Your Worship. Really, the only thing I can add, we have a recommendation here written by the former Director of Planning in regards to how we should consider bringing resolution to this long-standing issue. And how to rectify it. And I did have a meeting with Mr. Shank last week, along with our Deputy Clerk Treasurer and our new Manager of Planning. And we had a meaningful conversation about this. And this is a recommendation that has come out of that conversation. And so it's brought forward to Council for your review. And that's all I can say about it at this time.
The $510, is that chargeable to Mr. Shank for someone to do a site inspection on his behalf?
The recommendation would be that the municipality bear the cost of that on behalf of the property owner, and that we pay for it.
Oh, so this is approving $510 to be paid to the former director of planning to go and do the site inspection? Is that what it's for?
Sorry, Your Worship, I'll rephrase. The inspection will be done by the North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority, not by our former director, and there is a small fee for that. It is to protect our interest in that and to have an understanding within, so that it is worth the expenditure, so that we can bring resolution and close this file, as it's been going on basically since the 1970s.
I see. Okay. That explains where the $510 is going to, at least. And anyway, so that's good. Is there a mover and a seconder of council for this motion? Is that a moving, yes, Councillor Lagasse and Councillor Corbett? Whereas the former Director of Planning and Development has recommended that a site inspection be done on the Kelsey Shank property and the lands leased from the Township of Bonfield at a cost of $510. Be it hereby resolved that council approves of this recommendation. Any questions? All in favor? Carried. There's no addendum. Confirmatory bylaw. We've made it. I'd take a mover and a seconder for the confirmatory bylaw. Moved by Councillor Corbett, seconded by Councillor Vinecore. Whereas council deems it expedient to pass 3 readings of the following bylaw this session, be it hereby resolved that a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council from March 22nd, 2022 to April 26th, 2022 be read a first, second, and third time, passed and numbered 2022-18, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and be engrossed in the bylaw book. All in favor? Carried. It appears that we've made it to the finish line. I thank you everybody for their participation, and I would remind CEO Walker and Manager Carr, I just want to have a brief chat with you after the meeting related to Public Works. So if we could maintain our communication channel here on Zoom, but we're going to end our recordings and all other parties are excused. So on that note, to close out our meeting, I take a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Lagasse, seconded by Councillor Corbett, that this meeting be adjourned at 9:12 p.m. All in favor? Carried, and thank you.
Good night.